Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. Just over 3 weeks and it will all start in London. The World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. On Chess to Impress we're busy with the countdown, the build up towards this great match by looking at all the other 46 events that went ahead of this one. Carlsen-Caruana is the 47th event in the history of the undisputed and official World Championship. We're in the middle of the Kasparov-Karpov rivalry. They played matches in 1984, 1985 and 1986, and 1 year later they were at it again. How did that match come about? In 1986 the candidate cycle format was changed for the first time since 1965. A candidates tournament was played with 12 qualifiers from 3 interzonals plus 4 seeds, and the top 4 qualifiers from that candidates tournament would advance to the candidates matches. The winner would play a match against Anatoly Karpov, who was seeded directly into the candidates finals for the right to challenge Kasparov. Karpov was the loser of the last World Championship match. The players that qualified from the candidates tournament were Vaganyan, Sokolov, Yusupov and Timman. 3 Soviet players and a player from the Netherlands. It was almost an all-Soviet affair. Jan Timman had to beat Misha Tal in a playoff. Sokolov beat Vaganyan in the semi-finals and Yusupov beat Timman. Then Sokolov went on to beat Yusupov by a small margin. Sokolov qualified to play Karpov in the super final. And as you can see, Karpov was 2 sizes too big for his compatriot. He beat Sokolov easily by 7.5 against 3.5. And he qualified to play Kasparov again. It was played in Seville in Spain, and this is a picture from the match. Not a great picture. I was very surprised not to be able to find good quality pictures of the 1987 match, and it was quite a match, this 4th encounter between Karpov and Kasparov. Karpov started by winning game 2 with the black pieces. Kasparov came back in game 4 and Karpov won game 5. Kasparov won game 8, so the score was equal when the 11th game was played. On the 9th of November 1987, white is Karpov, black is Kasparov. Kasparov in the last 6 moves has played the king from g8 to f7, to e7, back to f7 and then to g7. The engine gives an advantage for white of over a pawn, which is a lot. White's passed pawn is more dangerous than black's potential passed pawn on b5. And also white's rook is more active than black's. Furthermore, black has no plan for counterplay. A move like h6 will be very well answered by h5, and this is very good for white. So what to do? Karpov just played rook f2 to f6, and Kasparov played bishop b6. Attacking this bishop, and here bishop f2 is a very good move, and white keeps his advantage. Grandmaster Sosonko was commentating live for the audience in Seville, and he said here, Karpov is preparing rook c6, which is a nice technical move that increases the overall pressure on black's position. But, wait a minute, that's not possible, because black will play knight a5. And the rook has no squares, said Sosonko, and at that time Karpov did play rook c6. Kasparov could not believe his eyes, and he saw the refutation, which indeed is knight a5. The problem is that this rook is now attacked and has to keep protecting the bishop, because the bishop is also attacked. But the rook cannot keep protecting the bishop, because this square is taken by the bishop and this square is taken by the rook. There is no way for white to keep protecting the bishop, which means that black will win material. Karpov saw nothing better than taking on b6, there goes his rook, and bishop c7. Kasparov had won an exchange. The game was adjourned a few moves later, but the next day Kasparov showed good technique and brought the point home. What an incredible blunder from Anatoly Karpov in this game. A game which he looked like winning. In the end he lost it, and instead of being a point up after 11 games, he was a point down. 6 points to 5. But there was a lot more drama left in this match. Karpov won game 16 to equal the score, and you can see many draws followed, and then game 23 was played. On the 16th of December 1987, the score was 11 points each. A 12-all draw would mean that Kasparov would retain the world title, so Karpov had to win this game. He had to use his last white game to take the lead in the match, because it could not be expected that he would win in the last game with black. This was really his last chance. The game was adjourned and continued the next day, and this is the position after 49. Bishop e7 to c5 from Kasparov. Karpov is white, Kasparov is black. White is a bit better, but can he win? Kasparov just brought a threat in the position in time trouble. Both players were in terrible time trouble. The time control was on move 56 and this was move 49. Let's look at the threat that Kasparov brought in the position. Let's play a bad move for white just to show the threat. Let's play bishop g5, which is a bad move, because then Kasparov can take on g1. The king has to take, and then rook f1 check. Very strong move. If you take that rook, then there is d3 check, winning the queen, and actually white will get mated here. The bishop gives a discovered check to the king. King h2, then there is queen takes f1, queen g1, checkmate. If after rook f1 check you do not take the rook, but you play king h2, then there is queen f2, and black is winning. So that is the threat that Kasparov brought into the position with bishop c5. Karpov saw that and played rook c6 to deal with the threat. If you now take on g1, king takes and rook f1 check, like in the previous variation. Now it is a blunder, because now the queen can take, because after d3 check the rook can take the bishop and white wins. That's why Karpov played rook c6. And now drama, high drama. Kasparov sacrifices a rook. Rook 7 to f3. He loses his patience and blunders. Many moves would have kept the balance, but Kasparov went for this crazy rook sacrifice. Karpov took it. Rook takes, and with his flag hanging, Karpov finds the refutation of this rook sacrifice, which is based on the queen leaving the third rank. Karpov's queen is hanging. He first gave a check, rook c7 check, king h8, and if you now save your queen, for example queen e2, then black wins. Rook takes h3 check, king g2, rook g3 check, king h2, and d3. Attacking the queen, queen e1 for example, and then bishop takes g1 check, and white will have to give the queen with a winning position for black. So all that after king h8, and then we played queen e2. What if we go to another square with the queen? Let's go to b1. Then black wins on the spot. Rook takes, king g2, and this is checkmate. So white has a problem. After king h8, what to do? You cannot bring your queen into safety. There's only one refutation, and with his flag hanging, Karpov found it. He played bishop d2 to h6. What a move. Counter-attacking black's queen, and this wins the game for white. Kasparov also had no time left. He took on d3, there's nothing else. Karpov took Kasparov's queen, and check, king g2, another check, king h2, and rook takes g1. And now king takes g1 is okay, but then there is bishop takes f8. White is winning, but still needs to show some technique. Karpov found a better move after rook takes g1. He took on c5. The time control was made. This is move 57. Kasparov played d3, and that's when Karpov's flag fell, and they both looked at the arbiter, Gert Gijssen from the Netherlands, and it turned out that Karpov had made the time control. And while Karpov updated his score sheet, he had not written down the last moves. At that moment Kasparov resigned. This is a totally lost position for black. And Kasparov saw that there was no use in playing on. Why did he resign? Of course Karpov would not have taken on g1. That's more of a losing attempt than a winning attempt, because then there is d2. But what you should play with white here is something like bishop e3 to control the d-pawn. Let's look at a few moves just to see how white can win this. Rook e1 attacking the bishop. Then the d-pawn starts running. That's the easiest way to win. And if you take the bishop, there is d7, and white will promote first. And if instead of taking the bishop you play rook e2 check, then there is king g1, d2, then white gives the bishop for the pawn, rook takes, and d7, followed by rook c8 check and promotion with an easy win for white. Karpov had won the 23rd game and the score was now 12-11 in favor of Karpov with only one game to go. Kasparov had to win the last game to make it 12-all, and the only time in the history of the official World Championship that the world champion was able to win the last game on demand was in 1910, when Emanuel Lasker achieved that against Karl Schlechter. You can find that game in this series. I will put the link to it in the description box underneath this video. And there was no time to prepare. The 24th game was played the day after the end of the 23rd game. The game was played on the 18th of December 1987. After 40 moves it was adjourned and resumed on the 19th of December. White was Kasparov and black was Karpov. And this is the position after the 50th move from Kasparov, bishop d3 to c4. Let's count the pieces. White is a pawn up, but there's not so much material left on the board. Can white win this? Kasparov wrote about this moment: after 10 moves of steady squeezing, I began to feel the win was in the bag. Karpov's pieces were pinned up against the wall, and a little more maneuvering would lead to decisive material gain, said Kasparov. Karpov played king g7, queen e5 check, king back, queen back, king back. Slowly but surely Kasparov is increasing the pressure on black. He played bishop b5, king back, there's nothing black can do, and bishop c6. Queen a7, queen b4, and queen c7. Kasparov played queen b7, offering a trade of queens. That doesn't really help black. Queen takes, bishop takes, and for example e5, then bishop c8, and the white king will march into black's position. Black's e5 and g6 pawns are very weak and will eventually fall. This is hopeless for black. So Karpov did not trade the queens after queen b7. He kept the queens on the board. He played queen d8, e5, queen a5, and bishop e8. Now white is threatening to play queen f7 check. The king will have to step aside and then the knight falls. So queen c5 to keep the knight protected with the queen. Queen f7 check came anyway. King h8. Now black's king cannot play. The knight has to keep the e6 and g6 pawns protected, and the queen has to keep the knight protected. All Kasparov has to do is play his bishop around to the e4 square. Let's see how that went. Bishop a4, queen d5 check, king h2, and queen back to c5 to protect the knight. Bishop b3, now the e6 pawn is hanging twice, so queen c8 was played to keep the knight protected and protect the e6 pawn again. Black has a horrible position. As Kasparov wrote, his pieces are pinned against the wall. Bishop d1, queen c5, and king g2. It was the 64th move and Karpov resigned here. White's winning plan is to bring the bishop to e4 as said, and then white will win another pawn. White will go after the g6 pawn and will win it. There's one very nice variation I have to show you. Let's assume that Karpov would have played queen d5 check here. Then bishop f3 on his way to e4 to attack the g6 pawn. Queen c5, you have to keep the knight protected. Bishop e4, all according to plan. If black then plays queen b4, then you have to be careful with white. Many moves win, for example f3, and white wins. But if you don't pay attention and you think you can win that pawn on g6 straight away, then you're in for a surprise. Bishop takes g6, knight takes, queen takes, and then there is queen b7 check, king h2, and now either queen g2 check or queen h1 check. And after that queen is taken, the game is a draw. because black is still mated. He has no legal moves. And if that would have happened, then Karpov would have regained the world title. But Kasparov was not going to fall for this, and as mentioned, after King G2 in this position, Karpov resigned. Kasparov had done the unthinkable, winning the last game on demand, like Lasker did in 1910. Kasparov did it in 1987. 12 points all, and Kasparov remained world champion. Great drama and suspense, and the 2Ks were not finished yet. Well, they got a little break, but 3 years later in 1990, they played match number 5. And that's what the next video is about. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment if you like the video, and if you like the series, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is here. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.